Wait, you there, watching this video. If you're a fan of Dapperton and you're here after seeing something on his behalf, I've got some advice. This isn't for my sake, his sake, or even his sake. This is for you fans of his. If you were thinking about throwing a dislike or an ad hominem riddled comment here just because Dapperton didn't like the video, I'd like to remind you that's what he doesn't want you to do to the people he talks about. Why do you think he told you not to go looking up his sources and giving them trouble? If you go and brainlessly do that, you're giving Dapperton more of a disloyal and insulting fuck you than anything that's about to come out of my mouth. Once again, I'm saying this so you fans of his don't look bad, because going against Dapperton's wishes doesn't make you look right here. Okay, we good? Great, post-production spiel done. Hey guys, have I got a perfect commentary set up for you? Okay, wait, let's start from the beginning. You guys remembered when I covered that one satirician video a while back? You know, the one about Lacey Green, which got guest featured by Dapperton. Well, let's just say I heard there was a video of his that got commentated on. This was a commentary where I saw it and thought, yeah, I'd rip into this if he wasn't gonna. So imagine my surprise when I saw that it came out and Dapperton made a response to it. Because, the way I see it, if there's one person that ought to cover this response, it's someone that's well versed on things like this. Let's go. Whoa, wait a minute. I thought I was watching Dapperton's video, not the commentary Oh, it is his video! Alright, I need to get this off my chest. The editing is remarkably unpolished. I know this seems like a nitpick, but if you know me, I'm all for cohesive editing, because it can really show how much you cared about making the video. First, the intro or lack thereof. Honestly, it's kinda baffling to just drop your audience into the video you're discussing without any warning at all. The audience is just left to pick up context throughout the video, and it's a little difficult to get engaged if you're stuck catching up on what it's even about. It's like being on a bus you're driving, you change course, and you don't tell me where you're driving. I'd be concerned at the least. Second, there is no skipping or speeding up the original footage in this video in any way. Whenever there's footage Dapperton doesn't have anything to say about, and there's plenty of that, he just leaves that shit in. Mind you, this is done while disregarding how it leaves the video at a sluggish pace with a lot of footage that's extraneous to his counterpoints. And if you're worried that cutting out original footage might make it look like you're leaving something out that's important, then just say what you're skipping over. It's not that difficult, I've done it while Bane posting. If you misspeak about what's going on, someone can see the original video in the description and check if you're bullshitting them. Third, and I should explain this, there's something I call lingering footage. You see this here? Where he just leaves in a good number of frames or half a second whenever he splices into the video, and it looks like there's a leftover frame or two that blinks on screen when it clearly wasn't supposed to. That is nasty. It's like he's watching the video in real time and pausing whenever he damn well pleases. It looks ugly in post, and anyone watching knows you can easily fix this problem when you're actually going through and editing a damn video. When I started noticing this with old videos of mine, I started thinking how little time it would have took to adjust the cutaways every time I saw someone else do it. It kept me from doing it again fairly well. And this lingering footage is all over Dapperton's video. Even with the abrupt audio cuts, you notice how sloppy his splicing gets. And by the way, if you want to know why I'm making such a big stink out of this, it's because this stuff gets really damn distracting. Dapperton's had plenty of experience editing by now if you've seen his video count, and yet I've seen amateur and little-known commentators do these same mistakes, and I mean ones that just started on YouTube. Basically, it's shoddy craftsmanship for a veteran editor.
You just clipped to the wall!
Yeah, I'm clipping.
What?
I'd even go as far as to say racist and racism, for the most part, is mostly harmless. There's enough moral people out there to keep these racists from getting government power, so they cannot get slavery to come back. They cannot get any racist laws implemented. All they can literally do is walk around and say harmless, mean slurs at people.
But what about the ones that go beyond just mean and hurtful words and start getting physical against someone who is a different color?
Look, if a racist gets physical against you in the United States of America, you are literally allowed to kill them if they threaten your life.
You mean stand your ground practices, right? 'Cause there's something you didn't mention about that. A duty to retreat. In at least 17 states in the US, you're legally required to employ non-lethal means of self-defense unless you have no choice but using deadly force. And even then, you have some states in which standing your ground only applies to places like your home or your property, such as an office. That is castle doctrine, and you have a duty to retreat if you're not in a place that's yours in such states. Basically, in some states, no, you are not allowed to kill in self-defense right off the bat. Kinda misleading to graze over that.
You could also call the police and get them arrested. Racists have no power over you in the United States of America. At least they have as little power as fucking possible.
Oh, just call the cops. You mean in situations like... No, wait, I'll save that for later.
So, this is going to be a video where he looks at the global issues half full. Okay.
Go around saying hurtful words to people. Nobody gives a fuck because they are just words. And everyone knows words, for the most part, are harmless.
Until you put power behind those said words, and then that's where it starts to get heated. Also, assuming everyone is going to not care whenever a racial slur or a hurtful word is being said is a pretty bold statement to make.
Actually, the bold statement I'm making is that you're a pussy if it does hurt you. If you are a healthy person with a healthy brain, words shouldn't hurt you at all. I understand if you're depressed or you want to kill yourself, then you're not a mentally healthy person, and I can understand where you're coming from. But most people are mentally healthy people, and they could withstand mean, hurtful words.
Hold on. I've been meaning to ask you something. Dapperton, can I have you look through some randomly generated numbers so you can tell me if you see any problems? It's a weird request, I know, but it shouldn't take long. Does this set of 4 numbers seem fine to you? Like, I want to use this as a passcode for part of a big building in a... What? You're giving me a mean look, and I don't know what you're looking all mad about. Let's try another. How about this? What the, I thought I told the RNG only to include double-digit... Hey, what's with the stink eye? You mean to tell me that you're miffed about this? It's just numbers and text symbols. You act like it's got a bad context or something. Fine. One more. I might use this for a plot element in a story dedicated to Japanese culture. Seem okay? Fine, since you're giving me another dirty look, one more. Would this seem fine if I drew a scene with some characters in a school and put this on a chalkboard in the background? You're angry again? Now you're just being unreasonable. What, you think there's a bad event behind a random numerical sequence like this? You've really got to stretch if you're gonna tell me that some numbers can be inappropriate like that. Now, that's being a pussy. Next you're gonna tell me that some rough-sounding jargon of a word can symbolize a real-life horror story or two.
Zoom, motherfucker! What the fuck?
And people assume that all Muslims are violent as well. All that's perfectly fine to everyone, but as soon as someone discriminates against a black person, who are statistically 5.5 times more likely to commit more crime than other races, suddenly it's unacceptable.
That's an interesting stat to bring up. Bigger question, where's the source of proof that it's legit? Because I didn't see it in the description of your channel. And if your stat is proven correct, then fine, there's a stat. But if not, anyone who is really thinking on this would ask you where you found the stat.
I got the stat from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So for homicides, it's 45% of offenders are white, 52% are black. You may be thinking, oh, well, that's only a little bit over white people. Well, here's the thing. White people are 60% of the population, blacks are only 13%. You do the math and they're 5.5 times more likely to murder you than whites. More up-to-date FBI statistics tell a similar story. In 2013, black criminals carried out 38% of murders, compared to 31% for whites. Again, despite the fact there are 5 times more white people in the US.
Oh, so you did show your math. Well, that's nice and all, but it would have been good to know what you were on about earlier. Seriously, would you have omitted that info from the video entirely if he didn't speak up? As far as I know, this kinda just comes off as damage control. I can't respect your attention to detail much if you almost forgot to even do so in the first... Wait a second. What's that in the original video's description?
Chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. How are you, young man?
Is it updated? And furthermore, because, people will ask this, are you detracting from the problem?
Yes, I would be detracting from the problem if I said, yeah, well, racism is okay because black people kill a lot of people. But I'm not doing that. I'm saying simply stating facts is racist nowadays. That sucks. That is fucked up. That shouldn't be happening. So that shit's considered racism now, stating facts. So in my eyes, racism is a fucking joke now.
First off, no. You didn't say that, you backpedaling motherfucker. You said suddenly it's a big problem to discriminate against black people because of that stat.
But as soon as someone discriminates against a black person, who are statistically 5.5 times more likely to commit more crime than other races, suddenly it's unacceptable.
Of course Loudon would ask if you were trying to pull some shit. And second, you're surprised that people are uptight when you say something touchy like that? Alright, I'll elaborate since it looks like you couldn't figure out what the deal is with saying stuff like that homicide stat. Because I always saw a problem with blurting out that tidbit myself, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. And that's when it hit me. It's not the what of that stat because the logistics and data seem to check out. It's the why. Why is it so, and why bring it up? Why this statistic is the case, for example, is pretty goddamn tricky to analyze. Think about how many questions you could ask here. What social issues are associated with ups and downs in homicide rates? Are there any underlying conflicts that could explain homicide trends? Is poverty a factor that plays a role in this? These are all good questions to ask after hearing that stat, and none of them are given answers when you just go and puke it up on my shirt. Hell, to add insult to injury, even that one factor with poverty rates is tricky to look at. When one of the articles you mentioned brought up poverty playing a role, they then said how research on that was contradictory and therefore inconclusive. So it's got a lot to question, it's difficult to analyze, and you disregard all of that. I'd seem more tactful if I said something about 77 cents on the dollar without any background info. Oh, and funny story, while I was scripting, I saw a video by the one and only Based Mom, where she had something similar to say about gender trends. Sommer's advised to proceed with caution, and don't jump to conclusions on the matter. See what I mean? And then there's why you might mention it. Tell me, what do you think people would make of your intentions if you just shared this fun fact out of the blue? Would they think you're going, huh, interesting, or trying to insinuate something more sinister? For example, you could be trying to excuse an unfair predisposition against an ethnicity, or attempt to justify a cold-blooded stereotype. Even if these weren't the case, someone could easily second-guess what you're trying to pull if you say this in the wrong context. I mean, come on, if you don't think there are a good number of people out there that would try to be slick by applying this stat poorly, we both know you're lying. Now, is it still unjustified to be hysterical over simply saying a statistic like this? Honestly, you have a case there. Questioning info doesn't mean going full aggro against it. But I'm a reclusive, socially awkward idiot, and I figured this out. Even I recognize that this is a difficult thing to bring up, regardless of sensationalists getting on me like opportunistic pathogens. It's almost like you're feigning ignorance on how sketchy it looks when someone says that in an odd light. Oh, and you talking some shit earlier, when you did so to the point where you had to backpedal from it, isn't helping.
Also, some people say, well, being racist is worse than discrimination against religions, gun owners, because blacks went through slavery over 100 years ago. When a Jew gets called a Jew as a slur in a way that makes reference to when they were slaughtered back in the Holocaust, no one bats an eye. But when black people get called nigga, or the N-word with the hard R, by a person of the wrong race, suddenly it's the end of the world.
This is gonna be a long one. Okay, before I get to the N-word part, let me just say that the idea that people ignore Jews whenever they're mentioned in a negative light by someone who is a bigot is again bold to say, since if no one bats an eye to them, why do people on the anniversary of the Holocaust pay their respects to those who lost their lives?
Yeah, only a minority of people do that, so you're talking about the minority. The majority of people won't give a shit. Okay,
Whoa, hold it right there. So let's just ignore that there's a day of the year dedicated to Holocaust remembrance. Let's focus on the US specifically, shall we? You know how small of a minority it is for people that show remembrance to the Holocaust? It's so little that there's an entire museum dedicated to it in the DC National Mall. You're really gonna write this off like no one gives a shit when there's enough federal support and revenue from admissions to keep that museum going? No, wait, guess what? There are at least 2 museums dedicated to it, because there's another one in LA. A minority of people, what a joke. You don't really expect me to believe.
Just imagine you're in a restaurant and somebody said Jew. Are you going to turn your head and look for who said it? No. But if you hear a white guy say nigger, clearly a white guy, would you look around? Yeah, of course you would. Would you be more likely to be offended? Yeah, of course you would. But why is that?
Because the word Jew isn't a slur, dumbass. You just said a descriptive term with more vitriol. That's messed up, but that doesn't make it a slur like Sorry, that happens whenever I say the word with a hard R. You know what is a slur for a Jewish person? I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with like. Yeah, go call a random Jewish person by an actual slur and see if someone chews you out.
Jews were slaughtered in the Holocaust. That's far worse than being enslaved. I'm sorry, but it is. You know what this is called? This is called a hypocrisy.
What, are you trying to play favorites when you really shouldn't be? Bruh, what happened to both groups of people in history sucked. A lot. Just because one technically had it worse doesn't mean you have to get all hasty and write off what happened to the other. For God's sake, the injustices that happened to black Americans happened in our own country. To say that the bad parts of history for black Americans hit closer to home is an understatement. Do I actually have to explain this to you?
Watch where you spray that thing.
As for the word itself, there's still a lot of dark history behind that word that black people still remember through history lessons and stories from their families or personal experience. In my case, all of the above. Words have no power until you put power behind them. And when you put power behind nigga, you'll be surprised at how much that word can hurt.
I'm sorry, but if that word hurts you, that happened 150 years ago. Slavery happened 150 years ago. Okay? Yes, your ancestors were enslaved. They weren't killed. Remember, they didn't go that extreme.
Okay, now I know you're just lying to my face. With the slave trade in general, poor living and working conditions introduced nightmarish health issues for slaves. Some forms of disease, like respiratory infections and worms, were unusually prevalent and fatal for the children involved. As it were, the big saving grace for slaves' numbers in the United States was that they were able to maintain fairly high fertility rates compared to other regions in the Americas. Don't tell me that fatal neglect doesn't count as killing. To add to this, I'd like to show you the lynchings that happened over 86 years, well after the Civil War ended. Hell, you see the number of lynching for white people? Apparently a good share of those were for white folks that tried to help black people or go against lynching. And keep in mind, they acknowledge these are only recorded lynchings. Theoretically, the actual number is likely higher. By all accounts, you look like you're full of it.
They just enslaved them. They fed them, they put a roof over their head, okay?
Boy, you know that free food and board was not enough to excuse jack shit back then. If it was ever a life worth living, to the people that were forced into the slave trade, they wouldn't have been taken to it involuntarily by conquest or kept in line with lashes. Seriously, what the fuck were you trying to argue? That those justifications, which wouldn't even cut it for livestock welfare, mean anything here? I don't know what you were trying to accomplish, but it came off as heinous.
And you're saying that that hurts you to this day. Something that happened 150 years ago hurts you today. I call bullshit on that. Look, you have no living family members that even went through that. So how it could personally offend you, I have no idea.
Maybe I can illustrate a point by catching your attention with something. Do you know why I have commitment issues as a straight guy? Because of things I've seen, such as this. Casual misandry, false accusations that ruin the lives of innocent men, legal settlements and divorces they can't handle, and a good portion of all of this going wrong is thanks to the kind of progressive rejects you would complain about. Even when we start moving past things like this and make a better future for our boys and young men, I know this will haunt people like me for far too long. People like me will realize that the only difference between me and poor folks like Jay Cheshire is that we got lucky. This is why I worry that the MGTOW movement has a chance to win and make too many people deliberately antisocial en masse. So whenever I hear that someone else might have inner demons from things like their ancestors or older relatives not even getting to sit towards the front of a bus, I think I can understand when people tell me they've seen some shit.
Jews were actually slaughtered for their beliefs, which is worse than being enslaved, so poking fun at their tragedies is far worse.
So, trying to bring an impact of one tragedy by undermining the other? Dapperton, are you willfully ignorant of American history? Because blacks just weren't enslaved, you know. When Africans were being transported from their homes to America, most of them died due to poor treatment or being killed for trying to escape back home.
So who enslaved, shipped, and moved all those black people anyways? Oh yeah, other black people. So why is it that white people get all the blame?
Dapperton, who do you think was paying African slavers to do as they did? Oh, that's right! Western society did. America and the empires of Europe were the ones which incentivized and rewarded slavers for participating in the transatlantic slave trade. And the Portuguese, who started the slave trade, did try to get slaves themselves. They only stopped raiding because it wasn't feasible for them. So not only did Western society mastermind this whole deal, but they only had someone else do their dirty work because it was easier. Good lord, you understand accountability like a child would.
You know, white people aren't the only ones that done slavery. You know that, right? We're also the ones who helped end it.
Well, they started it and we stopped doing it. Yeah, so that means you never participated in it. You see why I said understands accountability like a child earlier? Your relatively speaking logic isn't saving you here when that was still a pretty big fuck up on America's part.
More white people died trying to free the slaves than black people. Remember that. But nobody ever does.
Maybe people don't think about that so much due to one tiny, minuscule detail that's hardly worth mentioning. Not all of those soldiers were on the side fighting to end slavery.
I've got you in my sights.
1/3 of the soldiers that enlisted and put themselves on the line in the Civil War were Confederate. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the Confederate States didn't like the idea of quitting slavery cold turkey. Hell, that's implying ending slavery was the only reason that the Union fought, since there was also the motivation of wanting to make sure the South didn't secede into a bunch of unorganized countries. Also, maybe less black soldiers died during the Civil War because of how few of them were even enlisted. Out of the 2 million or so soldiers that were enlisted into the Union, only 180,000 of them were African American by the end of the war. The Confederate States didn't even properly enlist any black soldiers. To drive this point home, I decided to do a bit of math with the numbers I had here. In total, I got a 19.31% likelihood as dying as a soldier in the Civil War, for either side. Well, I decided to take the figures, subtract the numbers for black Union soldiers out of the totals, and then compare. If I remember correctly, the likelihood for a black Civil War soldier to die is only slightly lower than that of white— oh fuck, it's actually 1% higher. Hey Dapperton, you remember how you adjusted a statistic based on population size? You should have tried that sort of thing a second time.
Then during enslavement, you had slaves who were killed when their masters felt they disobeyed them, and during the Civil War, where they fought still under enslavement and not of their free will, and were used as glorified meat shields.
Okay, way more whites.
Oh
Way
my
more
god,
whites.
he's
An
still
unbelievable
on the—
amount of
wait,
whites
he might say
died
something new.
trying to free the slaves. And when your response is, oh, well, the blacks were just glorified meat shields, they were still being oppressed. What the fuck are you talking about? If anybody was a fucking meat shield, it was white people that were giving their lives to free the slaves.
Wow, you were remarkably unthorough here. Okay, time to show you how it's done. First things first, you missed an actual counterpoint to debunk something Loudon said here. Hate to tell you, bud, but the glorified meat shield thing has plenty of information going to the contrary. Remember, the only duties that Confederate soldiers trusted with black people were side tasks, i.e., no frontlining. And not only did the Union mostly consist of free states in which black soldiers were enlisted from, but a total of 16 black soldiers received Congressional Medals of Honor for their service during the Civil War. Ooh, got him. No, you didn't, Dapperton. If you were thinking that you didn't get him on this, I pointed it out. You neglected to look up anything or use another argument besides that broken hump of dump you tried to implement earlier. That brings me to the second thing. There were still difficulties that black Union soldiers experienced. Black people were only able to enroll into the Navy early during the Civil War. It took a while for the Army to accept such enrollment. Also, black soldiers had to deal with pay discrepancies so bad that Congress had to step in and fix it. It doesn't end there, because the Union Army was still reluctant to send black soldiers into the fray. This was partially due to prejudices about their bravery or skill, but it was also due to Confederate threats. Let's just say they didn't plan to necessarily take prisoners if they saw black soldiers facing them. And the only reason they weren't men of their word was because the Union had POWs to retaliate upon. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that even the war that so many white men died over wasn't terribly kind to the African Americans that wanted to serve their country. They weren't just meat shields, but it wasn't great for them. And I had to do all that mental heavy lifting for DAP. Black hat, more like granddad.
And guess what? After enslavement, lynch mobs and Jim effing Crow. Dapperton, I think Nat Turner, MLK, and Emmett Till will have a few choice words with you.
Now I know what you might be thinking. Wait a minute. Loudon already mentioned lynching beforehand? Doesn't that make Wes bringing it up a little redundant? Well, apparently fucking not, because from what Dapperton said a while back,
They weren't killed. Remember, they didn't go that extreme.
it looks like he didn't hear this shit. Yeah, he never looked back at that slaves didn't get killed point and thought, oh yeah, there were instances of killing for former slaves and their descendants after slavery. This is a bizarre oversight to make. He could have just went back and modified his script when he realized he might have said something wrong. Wait. You didn't script your response video, did you? No, this is not happening right now. No!
Dapped didn't script his video. Dapped didn't script his video.
Shit! Oh my god. It's so obvious when you consider that, the lack of editing polish, and the lack of research. Oh my god.
I got the Beatles death metal.
The word racist is now just a tool used by certain people to silence those who disagree with them. But it's stupid because the word racist shouldn't have that much weight or power to it anyways, because it's just someone being a dick. All I'm saying is that we need to stop attaching this huge stigma to the word racist and realize what it is. Someone just being a dick.
Racism is someone being a dick. So the KKK are Scooby-Doo villains now, huh?
I mean, they kind of are. What damage has the KKK done today? How many people have they killed lately? I mean, it's been a long time, I would say. Now, compare what KKK does today compared to what Antifa does today. Yeah, they're starting to look like fucking Scooby-Doo villains to me. And there is no fucking KKK, really. I mean, how many KKK members have you seen in your life? I haven't seen any. But I can't turn on the news without seeing Antifa on the fucking news. I can't walk outside without seeing a communist or an Antifa member. So, I mean, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, I mean, you guys are fighting an imaginary war. You guys are fighting the KKK that doesn't exist.
So a non-existent enemy is still operating in 22 states as of this year. That's a lot of turf to cover. Hell, apparently more scattered clan groups have been sprouting up at an alarming rate over the past year. And some of these states listed here, like Arkansas, Missouri, and Maryland, are states where you have a duty to retreat. Yeah, I'd sure feel safe with them burning crosses in my town, especially with the knowledge of what people like them have done in the past. I mean, Jesus, they had enough members for Anonymous to out hundreds of them 2 years ago. Haven't seen any of them my ass. And goddamn, really? I know you have a tendency to play favorites with certain issues, but you're really gonna try to plug about Antifa right about now? Because hey, you know what else has been on the... Oops. Almost spoiled the surprise.
Speak up, Francis. Your voice got all muffled.
I hate the water.
This video was all over the place with its message, and at the end it all boils down to a message about people using the word racism to silence others during political discussion, which is cool, I guess. But my god, you do such a piss poor way of explaining this. It's all over the place with no coherent thought or coherent explanation. You just get diarrhea of the mouth and spew the first thing you think of. Didn't your parents ever teach you think before you speak? I think that lesson should have been taught here. You unintentionally make yourself out to seem very ignorant and unknowing in this video, which it boils down to 4 minutes of you putting demographics in a box.
Yeah, it was pretty coherent in my opinion, but feel free to let me know what you think in the comments section.
Wow, I can't tell what you're trying to appeal to more. YouTube's algorithms are an argumentum ad populum fallacy. Sorry, it's just, I'm not an attention-hungry tryhard that tries to act slick with people, so I kinda trust my audience to know when they should comment.
Maybe this wasn't a good video of mine. I don't know, but it's definitely not the crap video that you think it was. I noticed when you were watching it, you didn't really understand my points, like it went above your head. But I think that's one of the reasons why you feel the video is incoherent. But what do I know?
Okay. You mean to tell me he had things go over his head? So Loudon overlooked a thing or two. Remind me, who exactly was the one that ignored the lynching statement after you tried to say slaves didn't get killed? And who was the one that said a sentence so badly you had to backpedal on it like a motherfucker? I drink your milkshake! And you acted proud about that comeback too. Alright, I think I'm about ready to give my final thoughts. I've been waiting a while to drop this, but did you think I wouldn't bring up Charlottesville during this video? Yeah, say racists have the least power possible, just after white supremacists started multiple physical confrontations in less than a day. Vaguely mentioned stand your ground laws, while in a state with such a law, that law didn't stop a man from running an innocent person the fuck over. And for the record, that person was the only fatality in that standoff. But hey, just call the cops. When one confrontation only had a single officer there to stop a massive scuffle until several minutes later. Oh, and another confrontation was where cops couldn't break up the fighting due to a lack of armor that was available. Hell, that's not even counting the 2 state troopers that died from a chopper crash while monitoring the situation. No, please, tell me how racists have as little power as possible now after these cronies marched around with shields, clubs, and torches. So what's my point here? I'll tell you what it is. Dapperton, I figured that the one time you wouldn't do shit like write off the KKK or downplay how much racists have haunted America is after this event. That is, when a bunch of neo-Nazi mofos looked at the reasons you say that racial bigots have little power, they pissed themselves laughing, and they circumvented that by going blitzkrieg on an unsuspecting college town. And mind you, this was a college town where the goons had pushback from members of the public. But you know what? Even if Charlottesville didn't happen, that wouldn't have saved your video. Dapperton's response could be summed up with the phrase, not giving a shit. Not about editing, not about understanding history, not about giving much attention to detail, and not even about using a script from how blatantly obvious it was. I used to think you were just sheltered on race issues as much as Carlton Banks was in Fresh Prince. But now I doubt if you even care about anything besides being a sensationalist. As if we don't have enough of that nowadays. The worst part is that this and the original video were already rendered redundant by a video on the same sort of thing. Yeah, I can think of a video about saying you racist too much that was the shit because it gave a shit. It's by Sky Williams, and unlike Dapperton here, he even offers a solution or two to help with that problem. I won't spoil the big lessons he gives from this though, because I recommend seeing the whole thing if you can. It comes to a similar conclusion without being pandering political garbo or abysmal damage control along the way. And Sky's video covers its ass to the point where he doesn't have to call strawman on someone in a comment reply before deleting the comment because he used the wrong YouTube account. Hoopa dooba. Motherfucker. This video was in dedication to a statement someone once told me. An acquaintance of mine once told me I wasn't politically right enough, and I didn't much care for that statement. So I think there's only one way to end this video. I know I won't win over most people by being pretty moderate, but hey, it's what I do. Oh god, that shit was awful. Oh fuck. No, that's staying in. Someone can see the original. Fuck. Nope. Holy shit, we're done.